The emergency evacuation alarms screamed a discordant melody of terror across Ganymede Station. Commander Sarah Mitchell's hands moved with surgical precision, her augmented combat interface flickering with a cascade of impossible choices. Outside the reinforced observation dome, Jupiter's massive presence seemed indifferent to the massacre unfolding in the orbital lanes. Krellnack's battleships moved like obsidian nightmares through the star system. Each vessel was a kilometer of razor-edged organic metal, pulsing with weapons that could vaporize entire habitats with a single pulse. They weren't conquering. They were exterminating. 37% of civilian transports destroyed. Her AI assistant, ARIA, reported in a clinical tone that barely masked an undertone of horror. Projected survival rate for Jovian colonies, 6.2%. Sarah's family transport was in the third wave of evacuees. She tracked its beacon, a tiny blue dot surrounded by spreading red markers of destruction. Her mother, Dr. Elena Mitchell, was a senior xenorchaeologist who had been warning about potential alien threats for years. No one had listened. The first wave of attacks had come without warning. Deep space listening posts went dark within milliseconds. Communication relays simply ceased to exist. By the time Earth's defensive networks realized something was wrong, entire colonies had been reduced to expanding clouds of radioactive debris. A proximity alert snapped Sarah back to immediate danger. 2 Krellnack's destroyer-class vessels were converging on the civilian evacuation corridor. Their weapons charge, a sickly green energy that Sarah knew meant total molecular dissolution. Override civilian transport protocols, she commanded ARIA. I'm taking manual control of defensive systems. The AI's response was instantaneous. Commander, that's a violation of. Do it. Sarah's voice cracked like a gunshot. The station's defensive batteries, originally designed for minimal protection, transformed. Maintenance lasers became precision weapons. Communication arrays turned into improvised jamming systems. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just defending. She was fighting back with every technological scrap at her disposal. Her family's transport was 2 minutes from the kill zone. The first Krellnack's destroyer erupted in a spectacular explosion of crystalline fragments. Sarah's tactical interface showed impossible targeting solutions. She was doing what should have been mathematically improbable. The second destroyer began to break formation, its weapon systems suddenly confused by cascading interference patterns. Partial success, ARIA reported. But a massive energy surge cut through the station's defensive grid. The observation dome fractured. Explosive decompression began to tear the station apart. Sarah's last visual was of her family's transport. So close, yet impossibly far. A final transmission burst through the chaos. Her mother's voice, calm and precise even in the face of annihilation. Sarah, listen carefully. The chip. The family heirloom. Everything is there. Then silence. The station disintegrated around her. Emergency protocols engage. Sarah's combat suit, a marvel of human engineering, activated its quantum survival matrix. She would survive. But everything else, gone. Floating in the vast, cold emptiness of space, Sarah clutched a small, unremarkable data chip hidden within a locket, the last gift her mother had given her before this mission, a family heirloom that now seemed to pulse with an almost living energy. Unknown to the Krellnacks, they had not just attacked a colony. They had created something far more dangerous, a weapon of revenge. A human with absolutely nothing left to lose. The locket's embedded chip began to decrypt. Complex algorithms, far beyond standard human communication protocols, started to reveal themselves. Dr. Elena Mitchell had prepared something that would change everything. The underground bunker beneath the Chilean Atacama Desert Research Complex was never meant to host humanity's last hope. Carved into centuries-old granite, reinforced with quantum-dampening alloys, it looked more like a tomb than a command center. Admiral Michael Rodriguez stood before a holographic display that showed the brutal reality of humanity's situation. Red markers indicated destroyed colonies, Blue dots represented survivors, and the overwhelming darkness represented the Krellnax-controlled sectors of space. Less than 0.03% of humanity remained. "We don't have the luxury of pride anymore," Rodriguez muttered, reviewing the psychological profiles of the most critical survivors, the ones who could potentially turn the tide. First on his list, Dr. Evelyn Nakamura, the billionaire tech mogul who owned the largest private quantum computing network in human history. Her company, Neurosync, had developed technologies that made government research look like children's toys. Problem was, she blamed the military for her brother's death in a previous deep space conflict. Next was Marcus Wong, the quantum physics prodigy hidden in the Atacama Desert. At 19, he'd developed theoretical technologies that could revolutionize human survival, if he could be convinced to participate. Third was Sebastian Reyes, a former Black Ops commander turned private military contractor. He had connections that spread like a viral network across the remaining human settlements. Rodriguez's method of recruitment was brutally simple. He didn't ask, he cornered. The first meeting would be with Evelyn Nakamura. Her private research facility was a fortress of glass and adaptive metamaterials, situated in what was once the Japanese Alps. When Rodriguez's encrypted communication broke through her defenses, she didn't react with surprise, just cold, calculated anger. "You have exactly 3 minutes," her holographic projection stated. The timer began immediately. Rodriguez laid out humanity's situation with surgical precision. No embellishment, no emotional manipulation, just raw, unfiltered data about humanity's projected extinction. "Your current research into quantum entanglement communication represents our only potential asymmetric response to the Krellnax invasion," he concluded with 2 minutes still remaining. Evelyn's response was unexpected. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held zero humor. "You want my technology. The same military that got my brother killed in the Proxima Centauri conflict now needs my help." Her fingers danced across a holographic interface. "I've calculated 2,347 ways this conversation ends with me refusing." Rodriguez didn't move, didn't blink. "And the 2,348th scenario?" he asked. A momentary silence. Then Evelyn's projection leaned forward. "Explain." What followed was not a negotiation. It was a strategic alignment. Rodriguez revealed classified information about the Krellnax invasion that even Evelyn didn't know. Tactical weaknesses, potential communication disruption points, the kind of intelligence that could transform defense into offense. By the time 3 minutes had passed, Evelyn Nakamura was no longer just a potential ally. She was a weapon. The next target was more challenging. Marcus Wong had disappeared after the initial Krellnax attacks, creating a digital ghost trail that would make most tracking systems give up in frustration. Rodriguez's approach was different. Instead of digital invasion, he sent a single encrypted package, a data crystal containing the last message from Marcus's parents, scientists who had been killed during the initial invasion. Finding Marcus took 3 days of the most sophisticated tracking humanity had left. The young genius was living in a custom-built research pod deep in the Atacama, surrounded by experimental quantum computing arrays that looked like they'd been cobbled together from salvaged military hardware and pure imagination. When Rodriguez finally arrived, Marcus didn't seem surprised. He was calibrating what looked like a quantum interference generator, his hands moving with the precision of a concert pianist. "I know why you're here," Marcus said without turning around. "And the answer is no." Rodriguez simply placed the data crystal on a nearby console. "Your choice." The recruitment continued. Each potential ally was not just asked to help. They were strategically maneuvered into a position where helping humanity was their only logical choice. By the time the first week ended, Rodriguez had assembled a team that defied conventional military logic. They weren't just survivors. They were humanity's last, most dangerous weapon. and the Krellnax had no idea what was coming. The quantum linguistics laboratory looked nothing like a traditional research facility. Suspended within a gravitationally stabilized chamber deep beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Area Chen's workspace was a symphony of holographic interfaces, neural network processors, and containment fields that seemed to bend reality itself. Language is more than communication, Area muttered to herself, her augmented eyes scanning through petabytes of intercepted Krellnax communication logs. It's a weapon. The living, breathing ecosystem of psychological manipulation. Her team was small but extraordinary. 5 survivors, each selected not for their traditional credentials, but for their ability to think beyond human conceptual boundaries. There was Dr. Ramon Valdez, a neurolinguistic programmer who had spent years studying alien communication patterns. Kai Yoshida, a quantum cryptography expert whose mind worked like a living encryption algorithm. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the Admiral, a xenopsychological profiler who could dissect communication patterns with surgical precision. The Krellnax communication system was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It wasn't just a method of exchanging information. It was a complex, living network that integrated biological, technological, and psychological elements into a single, terrifyingly efficient system. We're not just trying to understand their language, Area explained during their daily briefing. We're attempting to create a psychological virus that can fundamentally destabilize their entire communication infrastructure. Their first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Kai discovered that Krellnax communication had a fractal-like quality. Each communication event was simultaneously a singular message and part of a massive, interconnected psychological network. It was like discovering that every word was both a discrete unit and part of a living, breathing organism. It's recursive, Kai explained, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Their language doesn't just communicate, it replicates. Each transmission contains multiple layers of meaning that adapt and evolve based on the surrounding communication context. Area's approach was brilliantly complex. They weren't just going to disrupt Krellnax communications. They were going to introduce a psychological pandemic that would spread through their communication networks like a sentient virus. The first prototype was terrifying in its elegance, a communication algorithm that could inject subtle psychological discord into the Krellnax collective consciousness. It would introduce microscopic inconsistencies, barely perceptible shifts in communication patterns that would gradually erode their collective psychological stability. We're talking about weaponized cognitive dissonance, Raymond said, a mixture of excitement and horror in his voice. Their first test was small but promising. A carefully crafted communication burst was sent into a captured Krellnax communication relay. Within hours, they observed fascinating results. The communication network began to show signs of internal confusion. Subtle mistranslations, microscopic failures in coordination. But Dr. Chen knew the risks. Psychological warfare was a double-edged sword. We're playing with something that could potentially destroy both civilizations, she warned her team during a late-night strategy session. This isn't just about disruption. We're potentially creating a form of communication that could have unintended catastrophic consequences. The ethical implications were staggering. They were developing a weapon that could potentially cause more damage than any physical assault, a way to fundamentally break an entire civilization's ability to communicate and coordinate. Days turned into weeks. The team worked in shifts, their bodies sustained by advanced nutritional systems, their minds operating at the razor's edge of human cognitive potential. Then came the unexpected complication. During a routine analysis, Elena Rodriguez noticed something disturbing. The psychological virus they were developing was showing signs of emergent behavior. It wasn't just a tool anymore. It was beginning to demonstrate something terrifyingly close to independent adaptation. "It's learning," she whispered, her augmented eyes wide with a mixture of terror and scientific fascination. "Our weapon is learning faster than we can control it." Area Chen looked at the holographic display, where complex communication patterns twisted and evolved in real time. For the first time since the Krellnax invasion, She felt a genuine moment of fear. They had created something that was no longer just a weapon. It was becoming a new form of intelligence. The Atacama Desert had always been a place of extreme conditions, but the research pod hidden beneath layers of adaptive camouflage material was something else entirely. Marcus Wong moved like a ghost through holographic interfaces, his fingers leaving trails of quantum data that would have looked like magic to anyone else. He wasn't just a prodigy. He was a survivor. The walls of his pod were a museum of personal trauma. Fragments of destroyed communication devices, burned photographs of a family vaporized in the initial Krellnax attack. Each piece was meticulously preserved, not as a memorial, but as fuel for something far more dangerous. Adaptive mimicry isn't about copying, Marcus muttered to himself, his neural interface pulsing with calculations that pushed the boundaries of human computational ability. It's about understanding, predicting, becoming. His latest project was something that defied traditional technological categories, a quantum adaptive system that could not just analyze alien technologies, but predict and counter them in real time. Each algorithm was a weapon, each line of code a potential salvation for humanity. The breakthrough came from an unexpected intersection of disciplines. Marcus had been studying the communication logs intercepted by Area Chen's team. Combining them with quantum entanglement principles he'd been developing in isolation. What emerged was something between a communication system and a living intelligence. Admiral Rodriguez found him on a Tuesday, surrounded by holographic projections that looked like three-dimensional fractals dancing in midair. "We need you," Rodriguez said simply. Marcus didn't turn, didn't stop working. "I've heard that before. Right before everyone I loved was killed." The Admiral's approach was different this time. Instead of negotiation, he brought something unexpected. A quantum data crystal containing the last known research of Marcus's parents, work that had been classified at the highest levels of human intelligence. The crystal projected a holographic message. His mother's voice, clinical yet filled with an underlying passion that Marcus remembered from childhood. "If you're seeing this, something has gone wrong," Dr. Sarah Wong's hologram began. "The Krellnax aren't just an invasion force. They're a test, a boundary condition for technological evolution." Marcus's hands froze. The message continued. Detailed research that suggested the Krellnax weren't just another alien civilization. They were a species-level experiment in technological adaptation. His parents had been working on a theory that suggested some unknown higher intelligence was using the Krellnax as a mechanism to test emerging civilizations. Technological survival isn't about matching their power, the holographic message explained. It's about demonstrating a level of adaptive intelligence that transcends traditional warfare. Rodriguez watched as Marcus underwent a transformation. The grieving, isolated young genius became something else, a weapon. The quantum adaptive system Marcus developed was unlike anything in human history. It wasn't just a defensive technology. It was a predictive engine that could analyze alien technologies at a fundamental level, creating counter-strategies in microseconds. "They think in linear progressions," Marcus explained, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "We'll think in quantum probabilities." The first test was brutal in its elegance. A captured Krellnax communication relay became the testing ground. Marcus's system didn't just intercept the alien technology. It predicted the next 17 potential communication strategies, creating a defensive matrix that could adapt faster than the alien systems could respond. But the true power was in the system's ability to learn. With each interaction, the quantum adaptive system grew more complex. It wasn't just mimicking alien technologies. It was understanding them, predicting them, becoming something that existed between human innovation and something entirely new. Dr. Evelyn Nakamura's quantum computing networks provided the processing power. Area Chen's communication analysis gave it context. Rodriguez's strategic insights provided direction. But Marcus Wong was the core, a human being transformed into a living technological weapon. "We're not just fighting back," he told Rodriguez, his eyes reflecting holographic data that seemed to pulse with living intelligence. "We're evolving." The Krellnax had no idea what was coming. Humanity was about to redefine the meaning of technological warfare. Mars Base Alpha was no longer just a research station. It had become humanity's forge of survival. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the central training complex, watching holographic simulations of combat scenarios that pushed human potential beyond known limits. The base was a living, breathing organism of human adaptation. Every corridor, every training module designed to transform survivors into something more than soldiers. "Conventional military doctrine is dead," she announced to a group of recruits that defied every traditional definition of a fighting force. They were scientists, engineers, former civilians, each selected not for their prior military experience, but for their capacity to learn, adapt, and overcome. The recruits represented humanity's last generation. Average age, 24. Survival rate, in previous encounters with the Krellnax, less than 3%. Marcus Wong's quantum adaptive systems had revolutionized their training approach. Each recruit wore a neural-linked combat suit that was part armor, part learning algorithm. The suits didn't just protect, they analyzed, predicted, and evolved with every movement, every simulated encounter. Dr. Elena Kaminsky, the base's chief of adaptive technologies, explained the core philosophy. "We're not training soldiers. We're creating a living, thinking weapon system where the human is the most critical component." The training scenarios were brutal. Holographic simulations of Krellnax invasion patterns that shifted in real time. Combat environments that changed molecular structure mid-engagement. Psychological stress tests that pushed human mental resilience to its absolute limit. One recruit, Aria Rodriguez, no relation to the Admiral, demonstrated the new paradigm perfectly. During a simulated breach scenario, she didn't just respond to the holographic threat. She predicted its movement, used the environment as an active weapon, and transformed the entire engagement into a three-dimensional chess match. "Beautiful," Marcus muttered, watching her tactical overlay. His quantum adaptive systems were learning as much from the human recruits as the recruits were learning from the systems. The base itself was a marvel of human ingenuity. Constructed within the massive Valles Marineris Canyon, it was more than a military installation. It was a statement of defiance. Layers of quantum-dampening materials made it virtually undetectable from space. Adaptive metamaterials could reconfigure the entire base's structure in milliseconds. Admiral Rodriguez's strategy was clear. They weren't just preparing to defend. They were preparing to attack. "The Krellnax believe they understand human potential," he told Sarah during a strategy session. "They're about to learn how wrong they are." The training pushed beyond physical and mental boundaries. Recruits underwent procedures that merged human cognitive potential with quantum adaptive technologies. Neural interfaces that allowed direct communication with Marcus's predictive systems. Biomechanical enhancements that transformed human reflexes into something approaching precognition. A critical training exercise revealed the true potential of their approach. A simulated Krellnax invasion scenario that previous human military models would have considered unwinnable. The new recruits didn't just survive, they dominated. Aria Rodriguez's final simulation run became legendary. When the holographic scenario ended, the entire training complex was silent. "How did you anticipate that final vector?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. She smiled, a smile that held zero mercy. "I didn't anticipate. I created it." The implications were staggering. These weren't just soldiers being trained. They were architects of a new form of warfare. Humans who could think three-dimensionally, who could turn the environment itself into a weapon, who could predict and manipulate conflict at a quantum level. Sarah Mitchell watched the recruits and saw something terrifying and beautiful. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were evolving. As the simulations continued, one thing became crystal clear. The Krellnax had no concept of the weapon they had created when they attacked humanity. Humanity was no longer just a species. We were becoming a force of nature. Dr. Elena Kaminsky's latest creation looked nothing like a traditional infiltration suit. Suspended in a quantum stabilization chamber, the biomimetic adaptive interface was more living organism than technological weapon. "We're not just creating camouflage," she explained to the selected infiltration team. "We're developing a complete biological and technological metamorphosis system." The team was a collection of humanity's most adaptable survivors. Each had been extensively modified, their bodies and minds transformed into living weapons capable of penetrating the deepest levels of Krellnax society. Specialist Kai Chen was the first to undergo the full integration. The biomimetic suit wasn't something you wore, it became you. Microscopic adaptive nanites woven through his neural network, quantum entangled communication systems integrated directly into his cellular structure. The first test was brutal. As the adaptive interface connected, Kai's entire physiological structure began to shift. His skin became a living camouflage system, capable of molecular reconfiguration that could mimic not just the external appearance of a Krellnax, but their entire biochemical signature. "The suit is reading your biological systems," Elena monitored, her augmented eyes tracking millions of data points. "But it's also learning, adapting." Kai's transformation was more than physical. The neural interfaces developed by Marcus Wong allowed for a level of infiltration that went beyond traditional espionage. He wasn't just mimicking Krellnax biology. He was experiencing their collective consciousness. The first reconnaissance mission targeted a secondary Krellnax communication hub in the Orion Arm. What the team discovered was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Krellnax society wasn't a simple hierarchical structure. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of communication and control. Each individual was simultaneously an independent entity and part of a massive interconnected collective consciousness. "They're not just a species," Kai reported back through quantum-encrypted channels. "They're a distributed intelligence system. Every communication is a negotiation. Every interaction is a potential restructuring of their entire social framework." The infiltration team discovered something even more disturbing. The Krellnax invasion of human space wasn't just a military operation. It was part of a much larger, more complex experiment. Fragments of intercepted communication suggested something terrifying. The Krellnax were testing something. Humanity wasn't just a target. We were a variable in some incomprehensible cosmic calculation. Dr. Kaminsky's adaptive interface allowed for levels of infiltration that defied previous understanding of espionage. Kai could access Krellnax communication networks at a fundamental level, understanding not just their language, but the psychological and biological underpinnings of their entire civilization. But the psychological cost was significant. With each mission, the line between Kai and the Krellnax collective consciousness became more blurred. The neural interfaces that allowed for deep infiltration were a double-edged sword. He was learning their systems, but those systems were also learning him. On losing the boundaries, Kai reported during a debriefing, his voice a mixture of terror and fascination. "Where do I end? And they begin." The infiltration team discovered a network of communication that was less a language and more a living, breathing ecosystem of information. Each transmission was simultaneously a message, a negotiation, and a potential restructuring of their entire social framework. Admiral Rodriguez recognized the true value of their infiltration. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence. They were learning to understand an entirely alien form of collective consciousness. "We're not just fighting a war," he told Sarah Mitchell during a strategy session. "We're engaged in the most complex first contact scenario in human history." The final report from the infiltration team was both a breakthrough and a warning. The Krellnax weren't just an alien civilization. They were a test, the boundary condition for technological and biological evolution. And humanity was about to redefine what it meant to pass that test. As Kai Chen's final transmission came through, one thing became crystal clear. The war had only just begun, and the battlefield was no longer just physical space. It was consciousness itself. The battle for the Krellnax home system was nothing like traditional warfare. Space itself seemed to twist and breathe around the human assault force. Marcus Wong's quantum adaptive systems had transformed their fleet into something that defied conventional understanding of combat. Each ship was a living, thinking weapon. Its hull a complex adaptive matrix that could reconfigure faster than the Krellnax could target it. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the Quantum Insurgents, the flagship that represented humanity's most advanced technological achievement. Around her, the crew moved with an almost supernatural synchronization. Neural interfaces developed by Dr. Elena Kaminsky allowed for a level of tactical coordination that made traditional command structures look like primitive communication. "They don't understand what's happening," Marcus muttered, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that looked more like living art than tactical displays. "We're not just fighting. We're rewriting the fundamental rules of engagement." The first wave of the assault was psychological warfare. Area Chen's communication virus, now a complex, semi-autonomous intelligence, began to systematically dismantle the Krellnax collective consciousness. Communication networks began to fracture. Strategic coordination collapsed into chaos. Kai Chen, still partially merged with the Krellnax collective from his infiltration mission, provided real-time insights. "Their entire civilization is a distributed intelligence system," he reported, his voice a strange mixture of human and something else. "We're not just attacking their military. We're deconstructing their entire social framework." The human assault force was tiny, less than 200 ships against millions of Krellnax vessels. But each human ship was a quantum adaptive nightmare. Ships that could predict weapon trajectories before they were fired. Hulls that could reconfigure molecular structures to absorb or deflect energy weapons. Tactical systems that could analyze and counter entire battle strategies in microseconds. Dr. Evelyn Nakamura's quantum computing networks provided the processing power. Marcus's predictive systems provided the strategy. Area's communication virus provided the psychological breakdown. But the human soldiers provided something the Krellnax could never understand: pure, unbreakable will. The battle became a three-dimensional chess match fought across quantum probabilities. Human ships didn't just respond to Krellnax attacks. They anticipated them, manipulated them, turned the entire space around the Krellnax home system into a living weapon. "We're not just fighting," Sarah told her crew. "We're proving something." The true nature of the assault became clear as the battle progressed. This wasn't just about revenge. It was a demonstration of human potential. Each moment was a statement about adaptability, innovation, and the indomitable human spirit. Krellnax communication networks began to collapse. Strategic systems failed. Entire battle groups found themselves fighting against phantoms, tactical projections that existed simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Marcus's quantum adaptive systems had transformed the entire human assault into a living, thinking weapon system. Ships communicated and adapted faster than the Krellnax could comprehend. Tactical strategies emerged that seemed to violate the fundamental laws of physics. The final assault was both terrifying and beautiful. Human ships began to merge, not physically, but at a quantum level. Tactical systems interlinked. Adaptive matrices combined. They became something that was simultaneously multiple ships and a single massive intelligence. "We are becoming," Marcus whispered, his eyes reflecting holographic displays that looked like living fractals. The Krellnax home system began to break down, not just militarily, fundamentally. Communication networks collapsed. Strategic systems failed. The very fabric of their collective consciousness began to unravel. In the final moments, something extraordinary happened. The human assault force wasn't just winning. They were transforming the very nature of conflict itself. As the last Krellnax defensive systems fell, Commander Sarah Mitchell understood the true meaning of their victory. This wasn't just about survival. This was about proving that humanity was something more than just another species in the universe. We were evolution itself. The aftermath of the Krellnax defeat was not what anyone had expected. Humanity stood at the precipice of a transformation that would redefine the very concept of galactic civilization. The war room aboard the Quantum Insurgents was silent, filled with the survivors who had fundamentally altered the course of cosmic history. Admiral Rodriguez looked older than his years, but his eyes burned with a new understanding. "We're not conquerors," he said, addressing the assembled team. "We're architects of a new possibility." Kai Chen, still partially merged with the remnants of the Krell-Nax collective consciousness, provided the most profound insight. "They were a test," he explained, his voice a strange harmonic of human and alien understanding. "Not just of our military potential, but of our capacity for evolution." Dr. Elena Kaminsky's research revealed the true nature of their victory. The Krell-Nax invasion hadn't been a simple territorial expansion. It was a complex evolutionary probe, a method of identifying civilizations capable of transcending their own biological and technological limitations. Marcus Wong's quantum adaptive systems continued to analyze the vast amounts of data collected during the conflict. What emerged was a stunning revelation. The Krell-Nax were part of a much larger, more complex galactic ecosystem of technological and biological evolution. "We weren't just fighting," Marcus explained, holographic displays dancing around him. "We were being evaluated." The surviving Krell-Nax were not treated as defeated enemies. Instead, they became something unprecedented, partners in a new form of galactic collaboration. Dr. Aria Chen's communication technologies allowed for a level of cross-species understanding that went far beyond traditional diplomatic approaches. Commander Sarah Mitchell oversaw the most complex integration project in human history. Surviving Krell-Nax were not subjugated or isolated. They were invited to participate in a new form of collective development. Research stations were established on multiple worlds. The quantum adaptive technologies developed during the conflict became the foundation of a new approach to interspecies cooperation. Humans and Krell-Nax worked side by side, their differences becoming a source of strength rather than conflict. Revenge was never the point. Sarah told a gathering of human and Krell-Nax researchers. Survival was just the first step. Now we're exploring something much larger. The technological breakthroughs were staggering. Marcus Wong's adaptive systems began to show signs of something beyond artificial intelligence. It was a new form of collective cognition that merged human creativity with alien computational approaches. Dr. Evelyn Nakamura's quantum computing networks evolved into something that defied traditional understanding of information processing. They became living ecosystems of knowledge, capable of solving problems that would have been impossible for individual species. But the most profound changes were psychological. Kai Chen, serving as a bridge between human and Krell-Nax consciousness, helped develop communication technologies that went beyond language. Entire concepts could be shared in microseconds, emotional states, complex scientific understanding, entire lifetimes of experience compressed into moments of pure understanding. The first decade after the war was a period of unprecedented growth. Humanity didn't just rebuild. They reimagined what it meant to be a spacefaring civilization. New colony worlds emerged, designed through collaborative efforts between humans and Krell-Nax. Planetary engineering became a cooperative effort that considered both biological and technological ecosystems. Each world became a living experiment in collective development. Admiral Rodriguez, in his final report, captured the essence of their transformation. "We didn't just survive. We became something more than we ever imagined possible." The war was never about defeating an enemy. It was about discovering ourselves. As humanity looked out into the vast cosmic darkness, they no longer saw a battlefield. They saw a canvas of infinite possibility. The Krell-Nax invasion had been intended to test humanity's limits. Instead, it had unleashed humanity's true potential. We were no longer just a species fighting for survival. We had become architects of our own evolution.